Hello there, my name is Adam, and in this video, I'm going to take you through from start to finish how you can set up Stripe in any application in a really lean way, really quickly and really simply. I'm going to be taking you through both the Stripe setup side of things, so creating products, creating subscriptions, creating webhooks and how you manage that, and then also the application side of things so you can create a comprehensive setup that works really well for the users in your application. Before we jump into it, if you're not familiar with who I am, my name's Adam. I'm a top 1% freelancer on Upwork and I've done over 50 projects there before I then went to create my own global low-code development agency called APG Software Solutions. In just under a year, we've delivered over 60 projects and we're constantly getting better and better. And so on the side, I'm always interested in no-code and AI advancements. I can build better products for my clients and also for myself. Now, without wasting any more of your time, I'm going to jump into the first module, which is a quick discussion on what Stripe actually is. Stripe is one of the biggest payment processes out there, and it's one of the most common if you're building some type of application. It's very useful for taking one-time payments, possibly taking subscription payments, and you can also send payment links and invoices directly out of the platform itself. Some of the common use cases that people are using Stripe for are they may have some sort of SaaS application and they want to take one-time payments or subscriptions through that app. They may have some sort of internal tool and they want to create invoices and send payment links out of Stripe, or possibly you run some sort of two-sided marketplace where you have sellers and buyers in one platform. You want to facilitate that trade, but then you also want to take a cut off the top. Now, an example of that kind of platform would be Upwork itself. So you have freelancers who are the buyers, you have clients who are posting jobs who are the sellers, and then Upwork takes a small percentage of all of the transactions facilitated on the platform as the third party. Setting up that two-sided marketplace is what Stripe calls Stripe Connect. No matter which of these you're looking to achieve in your application, the way you set it up is going to be relatively similar no matter what. Before I jump into the technical side of things, I want to quickly talk about the different ways that you can set up Stripe. Stripe can be really overly complex because you're handling very sensitive payment data, and it can get really complicated when you start thinking about refunds, free trials, all these different subscription products, different subscription periods, what happens when a user moves their subscription midway through a billing period, and all of those kind of things. So what I tend to recommend, especially if you're building an MVP or your early stages in your development process, is to try and keep Stripe as lean as possible. And the way that I explain this is Stripe spends millions, probably billions of dollars developing their product, and you're probably nowhere near that limit of budget. So what you want to try and do is you want to let them handle the heavy lifting, especially when it comes to really sensitive data like payment data. And you want to try and keep your side of the platform as lean as possible so that you're not managing sensitive data. You don't have to spend all this money maintaining your complex Stripe setup, and it's easy and simple to use. Now, to give you a sneak peek at the end product of what you'll be able to build at the end of this video, I'll show you quickly now. So what you'll have is be able to build some plan tabs. So you can have single purchase or single credit purchases, which is just one single payment. And then you can have subscriptions, different subscription tiers, and that also works for annual subscriptions. So you'll be able to toggle between the two, and then you'll be able to purchase and come into Stripe's checkout and make those purchases. And you'll also be able to track the credits or whatever's being generated from the subscriptions through back-end workflow. So you'll see here, I've got 6 total credits. If I make a credit purchase, that will then go up to 7, and so on and so forth for the rest of the subscriptions here. So to get to this end product, the first thing we need to do is jump into Stripe and actually set things up there. Now, if you've just created Stripe, the first thing you want to do is create and fill out all your business details straight away. And if you're working for somebody else, you want the account owner to fill out all those business details and then invite you either as a developer or an admin. The next thing you'll notice at the top of my screen is I've got this orange bar that says test mode, and this test mode is toggled on. Now, if it's not toggled on, you definitely want to toggle that on. And essentially what this is doing is in your dev environment or your test environment, you can simulate all sorts of data without actually having to make real payments. And then once you've got everything set up and tested and you're ready to actually take live payments, you can toggle this into live mode. Once you've got that set up, the next thing to do is to set up your products. In our case here, we're going to set up a single purchase product, a standard product or standard plan, and a premium plan. And you'll see each of these has 2 prices in them. Now, first off, I'll take a look at the single purchase. This is actually just a test price that I created earlier, so you can ignore this, but the price that we're using on our homepage is the $1 price. So what you want to do to add prices is come in here and add your prices. So for your single purchase, you're just going to have one price object with the value of that price. For the plans, you're going to have 2 price objects, and you can see this is per period. So I've got $10 per month or $100 per year. If you come into your price object, you can edit it and you can create that price. Once you have all of your prices set up in Stripe, the next thing you're going to want to do is create some basic database fields for those price objects on your application side. If you want to access the raw template and actually run this for yourself, the template that I'm running off here is called Bubblebase. It's a comprehensive template that includes a large number of UI components and also a complete setup for your admin portal, your user portal, and a number of other things. So everything is going to be pre-set up and accessible in that template. And if you want to download it, the link for that is going to be in the description. You can follow along with this course and set up Stripe successfully in your Bubble app. Now, on the Bubble side of things, we've created some database records here for each of the pricings. So you can see here, we've got the plan name, we've got the mode, so you'll be careful here. The modes are either payment for fixed one-time payments or subscription for subscription-based payments. And we've also set the billing period, which is actually an option set or a fixed list. It's either monthly or yearly in our scenario. And we've got a bunch of other text just to populate these cards and make them look nice. What you can see here is we're storing the price ID. Now this is really important because this is how we actually extract data about the price object from Stripe. And if you want to get this price ID, you come to your Stripe dashboard, you click on a price, and you can see the price ID up in the top right corner here, and you can just copy that and paste it into your database. The next step is to actually build these cards and pull the information from each of your price objects via API, and that will each of the pricing objects so you can test that this is actually working and displaying properly. Now, the first thing you're going to need to get that working is your API key. So if you come up in the top here and just search for API keys, you can find your publishable key and your secret key. The next thing you're going to want to do is come over to Bubble or wherever you're building and set this up. Now in Bubble, there's 2 ways you can go about setting up Stripe. One is you can use Bubble's pre-built Stripe plugin, which is quite comprehensive and it will allow you to do a lot of different things. Or 2 is you can set it up directly via API. Now, as an agency, we like to set almost everything up directly via API because then we have complete control over customizing the API request and including or unincluding certain parameters however we like. When you use a plugin, you don't have access to the raw API request, so you can only use what the plugin exposes and allows you to use. Now that's fine in some scenarios, but as a preference, we just prefer setting it up directly through the API connector. So what you'll see here is we have the retrieve price API request, and it's a simple get request to this ID, and all you have to do is pass your price ID through there. In terms of setting up authentication in Bubble, the way you're going to want to set this up is by setting the authentication type to private key and header. Key name is authorization, and then you can post your development key in which you can find right here in the development key value, which means that will be used in your test environment or your main branch. And then the private key will be used in your live environment. Now, once you've done this, you can come across and start to build out your actual cards. And you'll see here what we do is we set for this specific request, we set the use as to data. Now the difference between data and action is data is what you use in your dynamic expression editor, and this will actually resend the API request if any of the information in the request parameters changes. And action is something that you trigger out of the workflows. So in this case, we're going to pass the price ID, which we've got in the database, into here, and we're going to pull the amount. Now you'll see here I use isn't live version formatted as text, and that's what I use to check whether or not we should be sending the ID of the price ID in the live environment or the development price ID. And the reason for that is this price ID, which you find in the pricing section here, will change in the live environment. So this is just your development price ID. Now, a really important thing to note is the way that we set up our credit system. So let's say, for example, they purchase a single credit and this goes up to 7. The way we set that up is we actually use metadata on each of the pricing objects. So you'll see here, if I go to standard plan, I come to the $10 per month plan, I've got this metadata variable called credits, and the number is 5. So I've associated 5 credits with this specific price object. And what's happening on the front end here is I'm then pulling that information and I'm using that to populate the text that's on the card. So step one is setup. You've got the API set up in Bubble. You're pulling the information or the price information via API, and you're displaying it in your card to set up some nice looking cards. Step two is to actually set up the checkout experience so people can purchase those credits. To do that, you're going to want to come down to your plugins and you're going to want to add the create checkout session API or API endpoint, and it can be accessed at this endpoint URL here. Now there's a number of different parameters that you're going to send to this plugin. I'm not going to touch on these in too much detail in this video because it can get complex, but what I'd recommend doing if you want to add or change some of the parameters that you're sending is Stripe's docs are really comprehensive. If you go to Stripe's API docs, you'll find that they've really detailed exactly. So I'm going to go checkout portal, which is what I looked at recently. And you can see all of the parameters that gets sent to the checkout portal. So these are all the things you can include as parameters. And so it's really comprehensive. It's really easy to see. So if you need to change anything from our setup slightly, that's definitely the place to go. Now you'll see here, I'll quickly touch on the parameters and what they mean. So success URL is where the user will be redirected when a purchase or payment or checkout session is successful. Cancel is where they'll go if they cancel at any point. Customer is your Stripe customer ID. Price data is the currency. Again, price data name, custom payment, amount, 1,000, one. So this is actually $10 because you divide it by 100 because this is in cents. The mode, which is payment or subscription. The application fee amount. So if you're setting up a Connect environment, this is the amount that's going to be redirected to you as the service provider. So to actually create a session where users can purchase either a one-time payment or a subscription model, we need to set up some workflows. I'm going to take you through exactly what that process looks like on our application. So when a user selects plan, we take them through this workflow. Quickly touching on what this is, we have the one-time payment. So we check whether or not the pricing kit's mode is payment. If it is, we trigger this event, which is for one-time payments. And then if it's not, we check whether or not the user has an existing subscription. If they don't, we create a subscription for them. And if they do, we trigger the update subscription workflow. I'm going to quickly touch on the one-time payment first. So if I go to the event, you'll see that we trigger this request, which is the Stripe checkout payment plus price ID. And I'm going to touch on this in the actual API connector here. So what you'll see is we're using the checkout sessions endpoint and we're sending a number of different variables. Now I'm going to touch on these briefly, but if you want to look at the actual parameters and what they mean in more detail, I'd recommend heading over to Stripe's API documentation, and you'll see they've got really detailed docs on all of the endpoints within this, probably one of the most well-documented APIs that I've ever worked with, to be honest. So you'll see really detailed explanations on what each of the parameters are and how you can use them in your requests. To quickly touch on these, we've got the payment method type, which is card, the success and cancel URLs. So success URL is where the user is redirected once they've successfully completed the checkout process. Cancel URL is where the user is redirected if they cancel at any point during the checkout process. We've got the price ID, the quantity, the mode, which is going to be subscription or payment, and the customer's ID, which is a Stripe customer's ID. And then this is where we set the metadata. Now we send this price ID as metadata because I'm gonna touch on this in some more detail, but the webhooks that we get back from Stripe when charges are made successfully and those kind of things, we use this to then locate which price each charge is associated with. If that's confusing, don't worry, because I'm going to explain that in some more detail in a little bit of time. Now, so what I'm sending here is I'm sending the price ID, which you can see I'm just pulling from the database. I'm sending the success and the cancel URL, which you'll see is our website's home URL, followed, so it's essentially sending them back to this subscription settings page. Cancel URL is the exact same. The line items are essentially the price ID again. And the customer's Stripe customer ID is what we're sending to identify that customer. To quickly touch on where the customer ID comes from, which is actually one of the first things that you should set up in your app, we have a database trigger to set that up. So when a user is first created, we set up this database trigger event so that we actually use the Stripe create customer endpoint with the user's email and name so that we can create them as a customer in your customer section in your Stripe portal. So this is the first thing that has to be done, because we then use this to refer and charge them and all of those kind of things later down the line. You can charge a user that isn't registered as a customer, and you can create them as a customer during the checkout process. But if you're running some sort of SaaS application, you may as well do this as soon as the user signs up, because you can just do it one time and then you can track all of the purchases and all the payment activity of that user on your app going forward. The way this one's set up, if you come to the API connector in this template, or I'll show you quickly what the API looks like, you have this create customer request. And in our case, we just send the email in the name, but you can send those parameters, and that's what allows you to create that customer. And then in the backend workflows, we attach the Stripe customer ID to the user, so we can use it later down the line. Now, back into this workflow, we have a custom event that triggers any errors if they do occur. And the way we usually do that is we log the error if there's an issue in that step one, and then we open an external website. So this checkout actually returns a URL, which redirects the user to the checkout page. So if this is set up correctly, when they click purchase, and I'll run this in the debug mode so you can see exactly what's happening. When a user clicks purchase, you can see we're going through the workflow, we're passing all of this data, and then the response we're getting is a URL to Stripe checkout. And so when we run that, we get taken to this Stripe checkout page. Now you can see up in the top left here, it says test mode. If you're testing, it should say test mode. If you're not testing, it won't say test mode. To complete the purchase, you can come through and you can actually add some test data. So 424242 is the typical one. You can add random future dates in here. You can put in a cardholder name and you can click pay. And then what will happen is you'll get redirected to your success URL if the purchase is successful. And you can see what actually just happened is our total credits went up 1. So you can see we've got something set up and working. The next things I'm gonna do is quickly touch on this manage portal button, and then I'm gonna take you through what actually happens on the back end to create these credits and enable this credit purchasing process. Now, first off, you can see what's happened is they've paid. So what we wanna do is we wanna do all sorts of things like show them their payment history. If they're on a subscription, allow them to cancel or modify or update their plan, and all those kind of things. And this is where Stripe's billing portal comes in really handy. What Stripe's billing portal looks like is if you click billing, it takes you into this portal where you can see all this key information, and it saves you as a developer having to build all of this stuff out manually. They can do everything from cancel, modify, update, and view all their information. And it's such a lifesaver because it's literally one API endpoint that you can set up in your app. So how does it work? Well, if we inspect the billing portal button, you can see that what we're calling is this Stripe customer portal endpoint. And if I show you what that looks like, you can see here we're calling this endpoint, we're sending the customer's ID and then a return URL. So it's really simple to set up. And what happens is we send the user's Stripe ID, we send the return URL, and then what happens is it returns a URL that redirects them to that site, which is so easy. The other thing that we can do, if the user wants to upgrade their plan, what they can do is we can actually redirect them to a section of that Stripe portal. So if you see here, if we go to billing portal and we click update subscription, we come to this page. So we've got monthly and yearly, and we can change these price objects and we can update our plan however we like. But what we also might want to do is on the actual page, if I come back to the page, if I click, you may want to show something in your application that allows them to do this. If I click this, I can send them straight to that page. And how I do that, if I quickly show you what that workflow looks like. In the subscription cards, we have our update subscription workflow, which is what shows that. essentially does the exact same thing. It calls that manage subscription, it gets the portal, but then it also adds this URL, which is /subscriptions, the ID of the subscription, and then /update. And you can see here what happens is if I go to billing and I look at this URL, it's just this test parameter. And then if I click update subscription, you'll see we now have the exact same parameter, but then it's got this appended to the end of the URL. So we can just do that manually from within our application. The create subscription process is the exact same. So if I click update subscription and I come in here, I can select whatever I want. Now, key thing to note is you won't have this billing portal set up like this from default. You have to actually set it up in your Stripe settings, and I'll show you how to do that now. If you come to your Stripe dashboard and you search billing portal or customer portal, you'll see you get sent to the billing section and you have this. Now this will be pre-configured. You have to pre-configure it yourself. And so what you have to do to show the different subscriptions and allow the users to update them is come down to this subscription section, allow users to switch plans, and then add all of your products in here that they can switch between. Now you can modify these settings however you like to best suit your use case, but this will allow you to create this portal, which is really easy to maintain. The other thing as well is there's a bunch of other settings in here. So if you want to configure this portal and change things around, you have to come to this billing portal or customer portal section in your Stripe portal to configure it properly. Now, at this stage, you've set up a user interface, you've allowed users to make one-time payments and also make subscriptions, and all you're storing in your database is the current user's Stripe customer ID and the price IDs of the products that users can purchase. The next step, and this is an optional step if you want to allow users to attain something in your app on purchase. So in our example, we're going to have credits, but if you want that to set up, you then need to set up some webhooks that allow you to store whether a user's current subscription is active, but also create things when users make payments. So the first thing I'm going to talk about here is how you can actually set up these webhooks in your Stripe dashboard. So if you come to Stripe and you search webhooks in the search bar at the top here, or you can just come to events. If you come to webhooks, you can see the webhooks that you've got set up. Now, in our case, for this simple example, we've got 3 webhooks set up, and this will actually cover you for a lot of the instances in your application, depending on your use case. You can see here we've got the charge succeeded event, the subscription deleted event, and the subscription updated event. Now, the way you set these up is you add a destination, and you set the URL of your webhook. So in our scenario, in our backend, we have the following. So for example, subscription deleted. Now our base URL is this here, and then this is the workflow that we're triggering. And as you can see, you can select the events. So this is my charge succeeded event. This is where you actually select the events that you want to trigger this webhook. If you want to actually see the bodies of the events that you're triggering and what's actually getting sent to your webhook, you can come to this event deliveries tab and you can actually see the raw data that's being sent. Now, in the case of Bubble, the way you would set this up is you detect data. And what you actually need to do when you detect data is you have to include this initialize parameter in your first scenario of setting this up. So when you actually set this up, you'd include initialize after this, you'd set it up, and then you delete initialize out of this endpoint URL, and that will then work going forward. What this will allow you to do in the case of Bubble is access the object, and you can see here that this object corresponds to the object that you're receiving from the API request. So what this does is it gives you a way to actually track when certain things are happening in Stripe, and you can update your application accordingly. In our really simple use case in our app, what we have is when the subscription's updated or deleted, we trigger some events and we basically just update a field on the user that says Stripe subscription active, which is a Boolean. It's a yes, a true, false, or a yes, no field. And then what we have is the charge succeeded event. Now, you may want to test a number of different actions in your app. You might want to make payments, modify payments, and then you can actually see what events are being triggered in your Stripe dashboard. And this will help you understand what events you need to look out for to trigger certain things in your app. So in our case, we've got the charge updated field, and you can see here a USD payment was made. Now we actually want this charge succeeded field because in our application to assign credits, we're not interested in charges that fail. When a charge succeeds and the user makes the payment amount, we want to attach the relevant credits to the user. And so the way this works is we set up the charge succeeded endpoint. And if this is called, we create a charge. Now this charge may be from a one-time purchase or it could be from a subscription. In our scenario, we have the get invoice if it's a subscription. So invoice is only returned on the webhook if it is a subscription. And what we do is we schedule this API workflow to retrieve the price on a list. So we basically return the metadata price ID if it's a one-time payment. And if it's not, we get each item's price ID. So essentially what we're doing here is we're getting the list of price IDs from the purchase, and we're getting the list of different price IDs and we're sending that to an API workflow. Now you see here, we've got the metadata object if you want to see what this looks like on the event side, and you can see the price ID is included in the metadata. Now you remember I mentioned before when we were setting up the API request for the Stripe checkout payment price ID, we had this, we're sending the metadata price ID. The reason we're sending that is so we actually get the price ID reflected in the webhook, which we can then refer to in our backend workflow to then send to a list where we can generate the relevant number of credits for the price that was purchased. So if we look at the retrieve price workflow, we retrieve the price from the backend. So that's retrieving the price. And essentially what we're doing is we're getting the number of credits which are stored in the metadata on the price. So you can see if we come back to the price, the product catalog, we come in here, come to the price. Now this one hasn't got it because I just sent that up. But you can see we've got 5 credits here. So what this is going to do is we get a list of 5. Now this is a weird workaround to get a list of 5 items in Bubble. You won't have to do this if you're not building on Bubble, but we send the Stripe's customer ID, we send the charge, and then we essentially create a credit. In this scenario, we'd create 5 separate credit objects, which we can then store in our database. And so when an action is taken from the user, let's say, for example, you want to charge 1 credit per report that's generated. If you're using some sort of SaaS application that generates reports, you can then mark these credits as used or whatever you want to do. But this is what we essentially use to then generate this. So this is just a count of the credits that's associated with a user. You can also set up an expiry date if you want to. And really simply put, we've now set up this webhook system where people can make all these purchases through your application. And then when certain charges are successful and certain events happen, we can trigger a webhook that posts from Stripe back to your app that allows you to then do things on your app like mark a user's subscription as canceled or create credits for a user. Now, as you can see, this is a really lean and easy to set up version of Stripe, and we're pushing as much responsibility as possible over to Stripe to manage user subscriptions and all of those kind of things through their billing and customer portals. And so it reduces the maintenance and setup that we have to do on our side, and we let the billion-dollar companies worry about that. Now, that pretty much sums up our Stripe setup. So now at the conclusion of this video, hopefully you've got Stripe set up properly in your Stripe dashboard, and you've also got Stripe set up properly in your application to be able to handle user payments in a really lean and easy to manage way. Now, if you found this video useful and you're building on Bubble, you might want to consider downloading our Bubble-based template, which has got this pre-set up, along with other APIs pre-set up admin dashboards and user dashboards, and all sorts of cool user components that you can use in your apps to help you build apps 5 to 10 times quicker. If you're not, but you're still interested in joining a no-code AI community or improving your skills in this area in any way possible, I run a completely free community on School, and you can join that for free in the link in the description. I hope this helps you in your application development journey, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks.